This is Reason Beacon. I'm Paul, and I'm broadcasting this channel from my bedroom studio in the great Pacific Northwest. Today's topic is redistricting, or as it's often better known as, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering. The word alone raises images of dirty power politics, voter suppression, and in the extreme, outright fraud. So much so that from its inception by the Governor Elbridge Gerry of the aptly named Democratic Republican Party, and I'm not making that up, you can see the references in the description below, it has always been a problem. To continue, from the beginning, efforts have persisted trying to correct the practice. Unfortunately, as we shall see, many reforms have actually made things worse. Continue watching to learn my solution to the redistricting, that is, gerrymandering problem. But first, a word from our sponsor. Actually, I have no sponsor. But I'd like you to leave a comment, if you would, telling us what you think, or visit the Reason Beacon website to see related videos. If you like what we have, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button. And if you want to stay abreast of what we're doing, click on subscribe and ring the bell to be informed. Finally, you can show your support by clicking on our support links. These are all in the description below. All right, now back to the topic of redistricting. It's easy to show examples of gerrymandering as a result of redistricting. For example, the 1983 New Jersey congressional districts. Looks a bit choppy, I'd say. The 1991 Texas 30th Congressional District. Wow, how convoluted is this? The 2002 Pennsylvania Congressional Map. Blatant gerrymandering. I can count at least 7 district ends, or dead-end alleys in this redistricting. Today, some reform has been implemented, but those drawing these districts have become more sophisticated, that is, more devious, such that the situation has gotten worse rather than better in many cases. In particular, gerrymandering causes extreme political divisions that halt compromise and promote division because the base of each party ends up wagging the dog as candidates take more extreme positions in order to get nominated. This makes the parties more doctrinaire and less willing to compromise. There has been almost as many attempts to fix this situation as congressional elections. Most have failed. However, a few notable changes implemented are, first up, the Apportionment Act of 1842 required congressional districts be contiguous. That is, you can go from any place in a congressional district map to any other place without crossing the district's boundary. This, at least, prevents the districts from being carved up into disconnected pieces. The 1872 Congress requires districts contain as nearly as possible an equal number of inhabitants, a suitably vague requirement, which until recently, or at least recently in my lifetime, was often ignored. Apportionment legislation in 1901 and 1911 required districts be compact. Compact was not defined. Note, The contiguous and compact requirements were omitted in later legislation. A milestone occurred in the 1964 Supreme Court decision, which held the one person, one vote concept. As with many well-intentioned concepts, this produced unintended consequences as politicians worked overtime to undermine the intent. In addition to these significant changes, there has recently been a rash of proposals which purport to fix the gerrymandering problem. I can't list all of them, but a couple of the notable proposals are proportional representation. Sounds good perhaps, but note, the basic question becomes proportional to what? Political parties, race, gender, ideology, religious beliefs, or what? If proportional representation is based on political parties, then what about third parties? What about independents? And what about other interest groups like language, ethnicity, religion, and so on? All in all, this doesn't seem like a well-thought approach. I mean, come on, we're supposed to be a melting pot. In addition, the Constitution doesn't require proportional representation, nor does it address political parties, for example. My own bias is to stay completely out of this quagmire. I don't want to get stuck or bogged down in this situation. Another approach that's being investigated is based on mathematical criteria. But some research seems to suggest that this approach is flawed as well. Other proposals either don't track technology or assume a particular technology exists and won't become obsolete. For example, the internet. Websites such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, and so on. These things may not last, or if they do last, end in a different form, and of course many people don't have access to the internet. Finally, one of the more interesting approaches is suggested by former Supreme Court Justice Stevens in his book, 6 Amendments, How and Why We Should Change the Constitution. His proposal is, and I quote, districts represented by members of Congress or by members of any state legislative body shall be compact and composed of contiguous territory. The state shall have the burden of justifying any departures of this requirement by reference to neutral criteria such as natural, political, or historic boundaries, or demographic changes. The interest in enhancing or preserving political power of a party in the control of the state government is not such a neutral criterion, unquote. I have no objection to this proposal, but it seems to me that this proposal suffers from many of the pitfalls of previous proposals, with many of the criteria left undefined. Plus, it seems to imply that political parties are supreme in wielding power. Philosophically, I just dislike this assumption. So, what can we do? Actually, I think there's quite a lot that could be done through a simple constitutional amendment. I want to keep it simple so that we avoid endless rounds of litigation. My proposal consists of 5 parts. First part is the preamble denoting to whom the amendment applies. Just like Justice Stevens' proposal, I propose a similar preamble of districts represented by members of Congress or members of state legislative bodies shall, Okay. First off, be contiguous. No apparent change here, but a constitutional requirement is stronger than a law enacted by Congress. Next, have equal populations of potential voters, codifying the basic one man, one vote Supreme Court decision. Next, be compact in the mathematical sense that the ratios of the perimeter of a district divided by its area be equal among the districts within a state and be below or above a minimum threshold. That's to be determined. Some studies suggest this threshold should be about 0.2. There should be a uniform population density within a district's boundaries. This actually is a major change. Advances in technology in the last several hundred years have created a clear urban-rural divide. That is a divide based on the interests of the citizens involved. Requiring a uniform population density within a district creates the conditions for constituents within a district to have a common set of problems that need to be solved. This is important so as not to skew problem representation. That's my proposal. And I think it's simple and workable and straightforward. Let me close by asking you again to leave a comment what you think about this. You can visit the Reason Beacon website too. If you like listening to this kind of stuff, I'd like you to hit the like button. I hope we get a dialogue going. And if you want to hear more, hit subscribe and ring the bell to stay informed. And you can show your support by clicking on our support links. All of these links are in the description below. Thank you.